Hello, and welcome to the Rent Check, where we talk all things residential property management and landlording. With me today is Devin Wolslager. He is a licensed real estate agent and property manager.
Hello, everyone.
Also with us today is Eric Ekstrom, who is co-owner of WSR Property Management, as well as licensed realtor, property manager, and general contractor.
Hello, everyone.
And also with us today is Jeffrey Wolslager, who is co-owner of WSR Property Management and licensed real estate broker.
Hello.
And of course, I'm Richard Gibson, Director of Residential Property Management at WSR Property Management, and I am your host for the Rent Check. Welcome, welcome. Now, we are here to talk about what happens when tenants don't pay the rent. So, what happens? What's first? What do we do?
Oh, in the state of California, I think it's a great thing if tenants stop paying rent, right?
That is absolutely a wonderful thing when
And
tenants
the
stop
sarcasm
paying the
flows.
rent.
Yes.
Yes. So what are your thoughts? Where's the stories? I know we got going on, if not over 100 years of stories in this room. What's your stories about tenants not paying the rent?
Just when you think you've seen everything, you see something new. But I think it starts before this point.
All right. So walk me back. Where do we start?
Gosh. When they first call or contact you, that very first contact, you're looking for red flags. Our clients are paying us to screen these tenants
Absolutely.
and to protect their investment.
So screening, what does that look like? Where do we start with that?
I think starting with that, having really clear and high rental screening criteria, and just making sure that, one, that it's published, that people can see that criteria, and two, that the tenants know what that criteria is.
That's a good point. Publishing. We do here in California now, we do have to publish our screening criteria. Otherwise, we cannot charge a application fee. So that is certainly important that we let that out. The tenants, applicants know what we are looking for so they can self-screen, right? If they know what we're looking for, they don't have to waste their money on an application fee. Absolutely.
That's a good point. They don't waste their time, and we as property managers don't waste our time either if we've got, clear and concise rental criteria. But to Jeffrey's point, I want to go back to an ad campaign that I remember seeing. This is going to date me, but back in the 80s, I think it was Volvo. A series of commercials about the best way to survive an accident was to not get in one in the first place. And I think that is probably the key upstream takeaway for all of this as we dive in is that when red flags appear, you want to nip them in the bud all the way upstream as possibly as you can. So that way you never get to the point where you've got an eviction that's looming because you have done your proper screening, you've got a great tenant.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, setting those expectations early on from the beginning.
I think what we're talking about too here is there's almost two types of evictions. There's the tenant that was a great tenant and something bad just happened. And that's a different discussion. We'll talk about that. But something went bad. There's also the preventative, maybe, eviction, where if we would have heeded those red flags early on, we wouldn't be in this point where we're at now.
Agreed. So proper screening hopefully solves that second category, right? We're looking at these people with an objective eye.
No, we check their credit. And just because they have a high credit score doesn't mean that they're the perfect tenant. You got to look beyond the credit score. One of the things I always look at is I dive down deep in their credit report. What kind of credit do they have? Is it new credit? Is it old credit? What's their debt to income ratio? I think a lot of times landlords don't look at that. They're bringing in $6,000, $7,000 a month, but they're paying $6,000, $7,000 a month in car payments, in credit card payments, and other bills that they're paying. How are they going to pay the rent?
Yeah.
So there's more to it than just their credit score.
Yeah, I think it's a little deceiving actually if you just look at the credit score and not what that credit score is derived from. So that can be a pitfall as well because if you've got a tenant that has been kind of gaming the system and has been playing with their credit score to bump it up so that way they look good on their credit profile, what is actually buoying that up and how recent has it changed? So It's not just a credit score. And any landlord that is looking at a credit score and saying, oh, I found my golden ticket because the credit score is X, Y, or Z, that's not going to be the case. You've got to drill down in that. One of the things that is a big sticking point for me, vehicle repossessions. It's a big deal. If you're willing to walk away in California from your vehicle, the old adage, nobody walks in LA, but you're willing to walk away from your vehicle, that says a lot about where your kind of break point is. And so repossessions of vehicles, things that, are seemingly insignificant, but they're willing to walk away from. Well, if they're willing to walk away from that, chances are they're willing to walk away from the rent. And so there are those breadcrumbs. You'll see them. You'll see them in those profiles. Oh, they've got all of these little things. As a standalone, it may not be a big issue, but as an aggregate total, they all are.
Yeah.
So monitoring that credit profile, not just the numbers. Oh, yeah, they came into a 702. Well, that's great. Let's work off of that. Well,
And also to that, they could have a lower credit score, and when you talk to them, maybe there was a recent divorce. Maybe there was a job transfer, somebody was sick, or what might, and if they can prove that, that might help you overcome their credit score. There's that too as well. And because you don't want to pass up a good tenant just because their credit score isn't maybe quite where you want it. Well, why is it like the way it is?
Absolutely. And the divorce situation is one that comes up quite often, I think, that the spouse really screwed things up, or the whole situation screwed things up. Nobody's paying the bills. Well, the divorce is going through, or something stupid, and now they're working it, clean it up. So maybe they're not the horrible tenant that their background check kind of comes up to.
but maybe they are.
Yep.
That's
It's
what's tough.
Yeah.
It's a lot easy when you control the narrative to scapegoat and vilify the other party. Oh, yeah, they're terrible. My spouse is terrible, and they roll all of our credit card debt, yada, yada, yada. I've heard that countless times. So it's always two to tango, buddy.
Absolutely, which kind of brings us back to setting those expectations up front. And I'm sorry, this is a business. You got to be a little bit heartless sometimes. You don't fit these criteria. I don't care what the story is. Maybe, anybody can come up with a story.
Heartless Richard.
Really? I'm not heartless. I
Sometimes.
Yeah, I can be. It is. Data is data. It is what it is.
And part of it here too is our clients are paying us to protect their investment. They're paying us to judge the best we can their future tenants. And so we use all the tools we've got in our toolbox to do that. We meet them in person. And I can't turn down someone for what car they're driving. Is their car clean? Are their kids kicking the walls when they come in? It might, and I might be saying things here that we're going to not be able to put on here, but there's more than just one tool that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like we've talked a lot about the credit report that we get, but we also run background checks on every person over the age of 18 that's living there, and that can tell a lot. We see if they have any felonies or criminal histories, or if they're on any sexual offender registries or things like that. Also, if they've had any bankruptcies or evictions, that comes up on the check as well. And so that's an important tool, or another tool that we use in screening tenants as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It all comes together. It is the big picture, right?
Yeah.
It's not one thing necessarily, but you got to look at it all in aggregate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've set our expectations. We've met the tenant or the potential tenant, the applicant at the property. We've gotten to know them a little bit, started our screening there. They've gotten through all of our screening and they've moved in. They've been perfect tenants for 6 months. Something happens, they go sideways. What's your first step?
I mean, you want to get in front of it as fast as possible. Communication. Hopefully they've reached out and talked to you. Hey, I've lost my job. My spouse got sick. There's a death in the family, whatever it might be. Hopefully they've reached out to you to start that dialogue. It's much easier that way than, hey, it's the 5th of the month. We haven't received rent and we're serving them a 3-day. And then they tell you, oh, yeah, my husband lost his job or my wife lost her job or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I've got do have a couple of tenants, both the husband and wife are TSA screeners. And The last time the government shut down, I got a phone call right up front. Hey, we're going to have a problem. How are we going to deal with this? And we dealt with that. TSA is closed right now. They're shut down right now too, and they haven't called me. So I set the expectations last time, and they were able to handle it. And I haven't had the call yet. But yeah, exactly. If they're reaching out to us, it's going to be a whole lot better for them and the owner if they nip it in the bud rather than avoid the phone call, avoid the text, avoid the situation.
You know, one of the things that experience has taught me is that things do not get better until something interdicts. So trying to maintain a status quo is just saying, I'm just going to kind of turn a blind eye to this and that sort of thing. It never gets better.
Yeah.
It's like the check engine light on your car. Don't expect the check engine light to just go away someday and think that, everything's fine with my car. No, you've got an underlying problem. So getting back to the setting of the expectations, what I find to be very successful is, right at the onset, say, hey, great, you're renting this unit from us. We're so glad that you're going to be our new tenant. If there's an issue going forward, please come talk to me. Get ahead of it. Come and talk to me. I am much more willing to work with you when you're proactive. If I have to go hunt you down, and I use this terminology, if I've got to go hunt you down to try to get rent payment, man, we've got a problem, right? You're not fulfilling your end of the contract.
Yep.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to, is fulfilling a contract, whether you're doing it between a landlord and a tenant, or you've got a property management firm like WSR Real Estate who is handling this as kind of the intermediary for you. It's all about fulfilling the contract. And setting that expectation up front is absolutely essential. In fact, I would dare say there's probably not anything else that's more essential than that, because that really sets the groundwork going forward for that relationship with the tenant.
Absolutely. Communication and setting that expectation, I believe, is number one. Absolutely. So we've gotten through that. We've communicated. Either they're avoiding us or we're getting to the point where it just is what it is. They're not paying the rent. What's your first official step in an eviction?
Well, we've got to serve them.
Serve them what?
The 3-day notice to pay or quit.
Yep. Serve
Gotta
them a notice to pay or quit. Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess taking a step back of setting those expectations clear, I always tell tenants, rent's due on the 1st, it's considered late after the 5th. And I let them know, on the 5th, if rent is not paid, I'm going to be calling you and texting you and letting you know a 3-day notice is going to be served the next day, and there's going to be a late rent payment due as well. And that way they're not surprised when a 3-day notice is on their door, or I'm knocking on their door the next day saying, rent's not in, here's a 3-day notice. So setting that expectation, making it very clear, and then doing what you say you're going to do. So on the 6th day, unless it's a holiday or a weekend, we can get into that as well, but serving that proper 3-day notice sets you on a better foot just right on the onset of the eviction process.
Do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, that's spot on. Devin.
Because the minute you don't do what you say you're going to do, then they're going to push they're going to push those boundaries.
Are you trying to say that people take advantage of you?
Oh no, never. Never. People don't do that.
Especially tenants.
Yeah. So 3-day notice. So when does a 3-day notice get served?
Well, on the 6th, typically, but if you've been in communication with them and it's something you're going to work out, then maybe you don't serve a 3-day notice. It just depends on the situation. But if they're avoiding you and they haven't paid rent, not when you're turning your phone call and you've prepped them, I'd serve it on the 6th.
Yep. Well, that's our leases. Typically, rent's due on the 1st, 5-day grace period, right? 5-day grace period. And then so that means the rent is late on the 6th. But depends on what it says in the lease, right? Depending on the lease that you've written up. So 3-day notice served on the 6th. Now I got to say 3-day notices, every city, every county is a little bit different on what it needs to say on that 3-day notice. I'm dealing with, I haven't had a eviction in 2.5 years, in over 2.5 years. And I'm dealing with one right now, and the lawyer doesn't like my 3-day notice. So we are working through that right now. But laws have changed, and every county's got a different requirement for what it says on that 3-day notice. So definitely want to interact with your lawyer on that. Make sure that 3-day notice is valid. So what's the next step? 3-day notice.
So if you've got a tenant that doesn't pay at the expiration of a 3-day notice, it's called game time decision, baby. So whether you're going to go to an alternative means of eviction, I'm meaning, maybe that's the wrong term, but cash for keys or some form of alternative to be able to entice the tenant to leave, or you've got to use the only real legal remedy that you've got, which is an unlawful detainer action.
Yep. Yeah, move forward. Again, if you said that you're going to do it, you got to do it. You can't dilly around, whatever you want to say. You can't screw around.
Yeah, so let's talk real quick about if you've got a tenant, though, that has been proactive. You've had to serve a 3-day notice because you want to kind of cover that base. But they've been pretty trustworthy. You haven't had any major issues with them, and they want to develop a payment plan because this is an event-based thing as opposed to something that's going to be chronic. How do you develop a payment plan with them? What does that look like?
Thoughts? Well, I think it's back to what you were saying, is that things don't get better without some intervention.
Right.
So I'm real nervous about bringing up a payment plan, period, right? If they can't make the rent, then what's going to make it better? So I brought up the TSA. I've got a couple of tenants that are their TSA. What could make it better? Well, once they finally get paid again, they're getting bonuses and stuff. So maybe that's a scenario where a payment plan would work out. You got to make at least the month's rent that you're in, and then a portion of the rent after that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm going after. Is if you're going to entertain the idea of a payment plan, is there a light at the end of the tunnel, or are you just looking for more darkness?
Yeah.
Because if there's no hope going forward, you're way better off as a landlord saying, "Listen, it's been a good run, but it's time for us to part ways." And if that means you've got to enforce legal action against them, like an unlawful detainer, then you got to do it. But if this is just a hiccup, and it could be any number of things. It could be, hey, my spouse was laid off for 6 weeks, let's say, and we're going to be short this month. We may be short next month. I mean, is that something you can work with the tenant? Yeah, I think so, especially if they've had a good track record with you and they've built up some rapport. But once again, you've really got to look at that holistic picture. Say, hey, is this going to be something that's going to have a clear resolution at the end? Once again, we're managing that expectation, but that expectation is bilateral. It's both ways. It can't just be, hey, I'm going to set this, and this is what you've got to do, and the tenant's like, yeah, I still can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, then you've got some hard choices to make. So you've got to be realistic with that. Once again, it's got to be a bilateral thing, which is why the conversation really matters. Meaning that the tenant's got to be a part of that, saying, "Hey, I can make an extra $400,000-$500,000 a month payment. I can get this thing paid up in full within 3 months." Okay, all right, let's talk more about that. That's a situation where, okay, tell me more about that. But other times it's like, you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you've got to cut that bait. So,
yeah, whenever I've done a payment plan, I've always gone to the tenant and said, "What are you offering?" Right? Let them make that offer. I don't know what their finances look like necessarily, and if they are giving me an offer, I can make the month's rent, the existing month's rent, plus $100, $200, $300, $400, whatever it is. Then if they come back and say, "Well, I can't do that," well, you're the one that set that number, not me.
right.
It's going to spiral downward fast.
Yeah.
I don't like payment plans. I mean, and again, every situation's different. And that's where I think as a property manager, you've got to be in front of it, communicating with them, hopefully, and you'll know right away. I mean, there's still, I don't know, call your spidey sense or whatever, but if they're approaching you and talking to you, you're going to have a little better attitude about it. But if you're having to track them down like Eric was talking about, I don't ever want to track my tenants down.
Yeah.
Come to me if there's a problem.
Absolutely.
I don't want to have to, reach out and try and find you. So it's just, you're going to have to look at every situation and make a judgment call.
Okay.
Involve let the owner know what's going on. Hey, they may want to weigh on it as well.
Absolutely.
And remember, I think it's kind of important too, especially if you're one of those landlords, property owners that only has one or two properties, you do not have a professional management company, which if that's the case, shame on you, because you should get a professional management company. I say that mostly in jest, but there is, it's a really sticky situation, especially in California, because of the tenant landlord laws constantly in flux. But, the thing that you've really got to wrap your mind around is this one core principle, and it's a core principle for WSR Real Estate, which is fulfill the dang contract. Fulfill the contract. This is a contract. I do my part, providing you with a safe, habitable home. You do your part by paying that rent. And if that gets broken, both parties, as long as they're in agreement, can change the terms of that agreement. But one party unilaterally cannot. And tenants seem to miss that sometimes, especially if they want to play games. They're like, man, you signed a contract. So now we've got a situation, Richard. What happens when the payment plan is not going to work, tenant's not able to pay? Now what do we do?
I want to interject something here.
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll get called from owners who are in this exact very situation. Hey, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago, the tenant had a problem. I've been trying to work with them, and now they're so frustrated, like they don't know what to do. They reach out to us. Can you fix this? Can you handle the eviction? Well, yeah, we can do all that. But I feel bad because 6 months ago, 9 months ago, had they, stuck to the game plan and whatever it was, and when that varied, then do the eviction, follow through with it. Because here they are a year later trying to, and now they're out a year's worth of rent. And that happens a lot. I'm not just making this up. There's been a lot of times where we've had owners come to us and, oh, wow, and you cringe, but they don't want to be the bad guy. Yeah. And that's hard. When you're the owner, you're emotionally involved in the property, and you like your tenants. That's where having a professional management company is really beneficial.
Yeah, I've got one owner. We actually manage, I think, 7 houses for him. But 2 years ago, we only managed 6 houses. And there was a 7th house that he was self-managing. And it was a friend of a friend or something, handshake deal, no lease. And she hadn't paid the rent in over a year by the time he came to me. I'm already managing 6 of his other properties, and he doesn't come to me until he hasn't had over $15,000 behind on the rent.
Jeez.
Eric and I can beat that.
Yeah.
We have a client, multiple properties. Unfortunately, one of the spouses had passed away, and going through and figuring this out, there's a property, and they hadn't paid rent in 14 or 16 years.
Oh, my.
And I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
And
We'll probably never see that again.
I hope not to.
I hope not.
And the tenants didn't deny it. Yeah, never came by to pick up the rent. And by the way, when you're going to fix the roof, I'm just laughing. You've been here 14, 16 years, and you could have put on a new roof many times over.
Yeah.
But, sad. But it's true. It happens. That's an extreme case. But there are a lot of owners out there who, they feel bad. They have a bleeding heart. And look, we don't want to be heartless, but it's a business. And that's one of the problems that owners have is they're emotionally attached to their property. And we tell them that when we meet with them, hey, this is now a business. You might have raised your family here. You had your birthday parties and all these memories, but this is now a business.
Yeah.
And you got to detach a little bit here.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting when you have a situation that has metastasized to that point. I mean, that's in a very extreme degree, but it's because nobody ever wanted to change the status quo. And remember, status quo stays the same until it's acted upon.
Yeah.
Until somebody changes that, it's going to remain that way. And once again, thinking that things are going to get better doesn't ever happen. And that's a fool's errand if you think it's going to change. So to this point, one of the things that maybe before we go on to the full unlawful detainers, I wanted to talk about when is it appropriate. We've talked about payment plans, but what about cash for keys, and what does that look like? Has anybody done a cash for keys recently?
Not on a rental. I haven't done a rental cash for keys in a long time. On the sales side, I have done cash for keys.
So I did one towards the end of 2024. I had a dear friend of mine. He had a colleague that contacted me. He said, listen, I've got this situation. And this was one of these situations where there was no light at the end of the tunnel. This guy was not employed. He was living there. The tenant had actually passed away, who was his father. And there was no prognosis. I mean, this patient was on the gurney. They were gonna go unless something changed. And he had already been out 2.5 months worth of rent by the time it got to me. And he's like, What do I do? Well, obviously you think, well, we're going to go for an eviction, but I said, well, how quickly do you want to get this guy out of here? And are you willing to throw some money up front at that problem, as opposed to an unlawful detainer that could cost you $2,000 to maybe $4,000, maybe a little bit more. Plus you've got the loss, that opportunity cost with the loss of rent. And so we established a value, I think it was $1,500, and I said, all right, let's see what I can do with $1,500. Well, I got that guy out for $1,200 in cash. And one of the ways that I do it is you establish contact. I gave him 6 days. So I told him I was going to come back on that following Saturday. And this is now going to be a week and a half before Christmas. He said, listen, I'll be here on that Saturday. I will have $1,200 in cash. You sign over this property to me. I'll have a little affidavit for you to sign. You'll do it on camera. You're going to give me those keys, and you're going to walk away from this property. I give you $1,200 cash, no questions asked. And that's what happened. Gave him $1,200 cash, had him counted out on camera, and he was gone. I returned those keys back to the owner. He was able to re-rent it within, 3 weeks from that point. So the point being is that there is a time and a place for cash for keys. And sometimes if you've got a situation where that tenant is just going to dog you, and this thing is going to drag out, and they may even start playing games. I'm not certainly going to mention the games that the tenants can play, because I'm not going to play those cards for whoever might be working this podcast. But there are lots of games, unfortunately, the tenants can play in California. So we want to take away that opportunity. Let's get them out as quickly as possible. Let's entice them to leave, and sometimes that cash for keys is absolutely, the way to go. So, and it's a lot less to pay $1,200 now than $4,400 later with, unlawful detainer, loss of rents. I mean, that number can approach $10,000 by the time you're done with it.
And I think it's important that you explain that to your owner, because at the onset, what? This is morally not right. They owe me rent, and now I'm going to pay them to leave?
Sure they do.
Let's do the math.
Yeah.
Again, This is a business.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not right. Yes, it was your home. They disrespected you, but you're here to make money.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. Yep.
Absolutely. Excellent. I didn't want to get too far into the functionality of how you actually do a step-by-step eviction. I've got a video on YouTube already that outlines that a little bit. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that. But as has already been brought up, California is absolutely very landlord-friendly, right? Not.
Negative.
So where is the legal missteps that you've seen landlords take? What are the issues that you've seen with that?
Go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, I was just going to say right off the bat, I think just kind of what you said, California is not a very landlord-friendly place. It very heavily favors the tenants. And I've worked with some property owners that, I've been managing property for the past 30 years. But then I'll mention some laws that have come out recently, and like, oh, no, I haven't heard of that. It's like that's, I think, something that landlords don't even realize that they could be in error of. They are not following the new laws. And so I could see landlords making a misstep of, I didn't even know that law was there. But I've been doing this for 30 years kind of thing. So I think that's important to stay up to date on the laws, know what's going on, and know what protections the tenants have.
Yeah, for mom and pop, been doing it for 30 years probably is not a good thing. They don't know. They're not paying attention to what's going on.
They don't even know what they don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I see two things with mom and pop landlords. One is they'll pick up their property they manage, and they'll give us their lease. It's a page and a half, online or from Staples or something, some very, very generic multi-state agreement.
Yeah.
And I'm just cringing, like there's so much here that is leaving them out for exposure. And then I see landlords that raise their rent indiscriminately without, there's certain time periods and amounts and percentages you can do that. And the tenant didn't complain. Okay, that doesn't matter. You're going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, AB 1482, some of the most recent stuff, as well as others. So we've got to be on top of those legal situations. Any other thoughts? Where are landlords getting screwed up?
Okay, I mean that's a very broad question.
Legally,
we see them getting screwed up in all sorts of different areas. But one of the biggest things is underestimating how difficult it actually is to get a tenant out. And if they think that it's going to be an easy process, that they can do it themselves, that they can go through small claims, that sort of thing, good luck. It's not going to happen.
Small claims.
And, I hear all sorts of different things. Well, I'm going to go do this, this, that, and the other. And you're just going, wow, you have no clue how the system works.
Yeah.
So an unlawful detainer action in and of itself is a pretty daunting prospect. I mean, and it is the only legal recourse that an owner has. And one of the bits of advice that I would give an owner who doesn't know their head from a hole in the wall in terms of navigating an eviction is be pragmatic. Meaning that, as Jeffrey mentioned, this is a business decision, okay? It's much better and much easier to spend $1,500, $2,000 up front than to have this turn into a quagmire that costs you $10,000, not to mention rehab costs.
Yep.
The sooner you can lop it off and start again, the better. And that should be the guiding principle for any landlord who's never done this before. What's the fastest way to get the wound closed? And if you think, oh, I'm going to nickel and dime this thing, okay. Those nickel and dimes turns into dollars and tens of dollars and tens of thousands of dollars. We've seen it happen. $70,000.
Yeah.
You're going, wow, this thing. Somebody files bankruptcy or some garbage like that. Next thing you know, you're plus 100 days. Going, oh my gosh, how am I going to weather that storm? I got to still make a mortgage payment on that property. So get ahead of it, even if it costs you a little bit more. You think it's going to cost you a little bit more up front? I'd much rather pay that than sitting there and saying, well, this is a ... scenario. That's going to really, really cost me. So
I feel like kind of on that note as well, I've seen this a few times where landlords try to take the cheapest route possible. And like you said, it ends up costing them a lot more money. I've worked with owners where they went with a cheap property manager that didn't know what they were doing, and they got into legal issues, and then they come back to us and like, hey, this is what's going on. It's like, well, yeah, you went with the
Fix this.
Yeah, the cheap option who didn't know what they were doing. They weren't informed, and so, like you said, it doesn't have to be the most expensive, but spend the proper amount of money to get the job done that needs to be done. And whether that's saving time, headache, it's better to get it done quickly, spend what you need to spend, and like you said, fix the wound as fast as possible.
Jeffrey and I were chatting earlier. We're kind of having our lunch and talking about there's very little that we haven't seen in our cumulative 100+ years of experience. Experience in property management is so key because we have seen it all. We've seen all different types of maneuvering and scapegoating and dodging of responsibility and yada, yada. You go on and on and on. We have seen it. We know how to, address those telltale signs and get ahead of it. And I think it's really, really important and very key for a lot of those that might be out there in this situation where you don't have a property manager. Man, a property manager can make all the difference, but it's got to be the right guy, right gal with, the expertise and the experience to be able to do it.
So I was sitting in court one time waiting for my case to be called, and a mom or pop type gentleman gets up for his unlawful detainer action. He went through the process, gave him a 3-day notice, whatever, filed his unlawful detainer with the courts, right? Come to find out, after the 3-day notice expired, he accepted a little bit of rent. Of course, the judge had to throw out the whole case. He's now behind at least 2 months, if not more, in the process. What are the timelines? Do you accept rent after you've given a 3-day notice? Where do you take a payment? What are your thoughts?
You don't accept rent. I mean, if they want to come in and try and pay partial rent to get caught up, no. And if you follow the unlawful detainer and you've got costs with your attorney, it's the entire back rent and the eviction costs.
Absolutely. So you're saying if you're in the process of an eviction, you've already filed your unlawful detainer.
You're incurring costs, your client is.
Yeah. They come into some money. They think that they can reinstate the lease. You're saying that they need to pay whatever, all the back due rent, whatever, late fees, whatever they're due, plus your unlawful detainer costs, right?
Yep.
If they can do that, then maybe I think is
It's happened a few
important.
times. It's rare.
Yeah.
I mean, they get to this point. There's problems, but I've had it happen a couple times where they came in and they don't want to move.
Yeah.
You know, they got 2 or 3 kids in schools in the local school district and whatnot. They're trying to make it work, and they've come in. Okay, you made everything whole.
And between first month's rent and deposit, they're probably going to be out that much money anyways, right? To get into a new place. Absolutely. But if you take $1, you're
Resets
starting
the
over.
clock.
Resets
Yeah.
the clock. So unless you are making a business decision
Yeah.
that this is the right way to go, don't take $1. Don't take nothing.
Yeah, and this is a very tough situation to deal with because you're dealing with, a family that's potentially going to be dislodged from their home, and this is where kind of the bleeding heart scenario really starts to pump up. But you're looking at, the legal term is indemnification. You're looking at, which simply means you're going to put people back to a state before whatever shenanigans happened. So if there is a prospectus that the tenant's got that says, hey, listen, I can pay all of this. I can pay the the attorney's costs that you're out. I can pay the loss in rent and any other, if you've got extemporaneous management fees or whatever the case might be, and they can make you good on that. Okay, I might entertain that. But one of the things you have to be aware of and not take lightly is that a trust has been broken. So if a tenant has been willing to go this far, you have to think, well, what is it going to look like in the future? And you may be better off. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying you may be better off to just end the relationship right then and there with that unlawful detainer, seeing it all the way through to the end.
Yeah.
But once again, if they're willing to indemnify the owner, indemnify the property management company and all those kind of extemporaneous costs, well, okay, maybe we can play in the sandbox again. But up until that point, yeah, I don't think there's any negotiation. You take, like you said, Richard, you take $1, you're all the way back.
Yep.
In the other end zone, and you've got to cross that entire field again, and that is a hassle.
I remember, 15 years ago, it seemed like I was very successful at just going to people that couldn't pay the rent and say, hey, you're late on the rent. When are you going to be out? And they'd leave. I don't think I've got anything like that anymore. They dig in their heels, and you got to go all the way. Any experience like that?
Yeah, I mean, I recently had an eviction for a client, and it was the nastiest eviction I've seen in 31 years, whatever. I've been doing this, I think, at least 30 years. And I during the actual lockout, the husband didn't tell the wife what was going on. There were kids at school. She was literally making dinner on the stove at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I was thinking, if this was a mom and pop here having to watch this and they're dragging her out of the house, I mean, it was dramatic. I felt bad. And I was like, man, this is horrible. This is horrible. They're an innocent bystander because of the spouse situation. But it's like, you don't want to get there.
Yeah.
If you can, years ago it was easier. Hey, can you just leave? We don't have to go through an eviction. And sometimes you're successful with that. Sometimes you're not. But this last one I had, and I haven't had a lot of evictions in my career. Most of them have come from owners that have come to us and said, hey, can you fix this? Yeah, sure. We've got attorneys and eviction attorneys and can handle it. This one was the same thing, but every stop in the book, they did everything. And it took 7, 8, 9 months to get them out. And, my client spent a lot of money. And the tenant spent a lot of money getting bad legal advice and doing things that they can do. He spent a lot of money because he thought he was going to be able to stay there. And it didn't happen.
That does kind of dovetail to another point about how much should a landlord hold back in reserves? How much should they have in relative liquidity to be able to weather a storm when a tenant stops paying? And that's a question we get asked pretty regularly. And I would think that at a bare minimum, 3 months, but typically 6 months, you've got to be able to weather that storm. If you've got a tenant that's not paying, and once again, they do some legal posturing, you've got to handle that. You've got to be prepared for that. Not that it's an eventuality, but that possibility.
Yeah.
So if you're a landlord thinking, I'm going to get 12 months of rent for the next, 20 years, I'm never going to have a down month, that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's not realistic.
That's not only is that realistic, but that's bad businessman-like conduct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a flag on the play. Sorry, buddy. We're not dealing with that.
Yeah, there's all sorts of games that the tenants can play. I had one tenant that kept filing different arguments so that we had to show up in court to defend it, and they wouldn't, right? They wouldn't even show up to defend or to argue their arguments. They would just file the paperwork, and that would just prolong it another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, another month to get these court dates down the line, and you just never know.
Yep.
Just never know.
Yep.
Well, one of the, I think, overarching comments we've been making here in the last few minutes is California is not a landlord-friendly state. And I literally, probably 9 months ago, a client was donating this property. It was a rental property. They're going to donate the proceeds to a local university. I mean, good cause. Good cause. Tenant lived there a long, long time. We gave them more than enough notice. And the last minute, I got a call from an attorney, and he said, yeah, they're not going to move. Well, why? Oh, just because we can. We're going to fight this. Now, it was free legal advice to the tenant from this attorney. It was bad advice, and they wound up leaving. We didn't have to go through with the eviction. But there's people out there that'll prey on tenants and give them free legal advice, and it's not always legal advice.
All right, so you talked about some ugly situations, some of your worst situations. What else? What's the ugliest situation you've ever had to deal with as a property manager?
Well, I will tell you about a property that I had 16 years ago, maybe 17 years ago, and a single lady with a couple of kids, and ended up going through a full unlawful detainer action on her. She ended up leaving the property just before the court date, and we took possession. She had hammered a lot of the home, especially the kitchen and part of the garage, so we had to spend some money on that. But this kind of brings me to my final point on the unlawful detainers. You take it all the way, even though you may not ever see that money. You want to make sure that you get a judgment against that tenant, because sometimes they do pay off. And this one did pay off 9 years later. She wanted to buy a home, and she needed to clear that. In order to do that, she had to pay it off. So that was always a great surprise when you've got a client that's like, oh, where did I get this $7,500 check from? Well, remember that eviction that we had? There it is. There's the judgment for you. So once again, if you're going to do it all the way. And you cannot cut the corners, and you have to see it through to the end zone. So
It's been implied that I can be a little heartless in this conversation.
no, we were explicit.
Okay, for sure. Exactly. Let me tell you about one of my worst situations that I actually remember going to my mom's house and complaining about this situation. It was so bad. Proof that maybe that was long enough ago that now I'm so heartless now that it would bother me. My heart is now.
Yeah.
But we went through a similar situation. Mom and dad it was mom and dad, both at least appeared to know. But dad, they weren't paying the rent, went through the whole eviction process, and actually went pretty quick. Within 4 to 6 weeks, sheriff was sitting on their front door ready to do the sheriff lockout. We walk up, sheriff goes in, and mom and dad are gone. Kids are home with grandma. Grandma and the kids know nothing about what's going on, and the sheriffs have to escort them out of the house. That was horrible. And mom and dad weren't home. I don't know if they were at work or wherever they were at. I literally had to sit there with these kids and grandma on the curb until mom and dad got home. And of course, they hadn't moved anything out. So now I've got to deal with all of their stuff. The house is in pristine condition, living condition, and now I got to deal with all of that. But I remember going and just, Mom, I'm glad I'm a little heartless. That was hard. Yeah. That was hard.
You know, that's really kind of interesting. Could you imagine being a ma and pa property owner, and you've got to go do that?
Yeah.
Maybe you hire a property manager like Richard Gibson to go.
Sometimes you got to be a little heartless. I'm sorry.
Something
it's
so
the law.
horrendous.
You got to do it.
That's terrible.
It hurts, but you got to do it.
All right. I would be highly skeptical of somebody that woke up in the morning and said, oh, you know what, that sounds like fun. I'd like to go do that. All right. Well, barring any psycho or sociopaths out there, I mean, that is a very, very tough situation. But having a professional property management company as the intermediary there certainly makes a lot of sense, because I know, for one, I've been there, done that, and I'll do what is needed, within
You
the
do what you
legal
gotta do.
limits. But
Yeah.
I could imagine somebody where this is not their bailiwick. That's intimidating. Who wants to do that?
Yeah.
What does that PTSD look like? So,
And
well
some-
done, Richard.
Well, here we are 15 years later, and still a little bit of something with that.
And I think sometimes even when you get the lockout, then the aftermath of the lockout.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had vehicles and a house full of debris and food spoiling and, all the kids' clothes for, school. I mean, it doesn't just stop when you get the keys.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we're going to go into detail on this right now, but, how do you store all their belongings and how long? And that costs you money. And it's a whole other,
I don't want to go too deep into that,
No, but
but,
that's-
what do you got to do? Can you just throw it all away?
No.
I hear in other
unfortunately.
states, Florida or somewhere,
Just
that
chuck
you
it.
just chuck it, throw it away, put it out on the street,
it'd
whatever.
be a lot easier.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot easier if
No,
you could do that.
can't do that.
Yeah.
Quickly in 30 seconds. What do you got to do? Any
You got to
thoughts?
inventory the property.
Yeah.
And how do you do that sometimes? When you're literally stepping over, and some people are cleaner than others. So a really nice, neat, organized house, that's pretty easy. But if you got someone who's very disorganized and it's messy and you're trying to assess value of what things are at a garage sale and you're walking through the house, and
Yeah.
it's not easy.
No, it's
I mean, that's probably the worst part about the eviction is after you get the lockout is all their personal belongings.
Yeah, their personal effects, and you're realizing that somebody's life has been upended, even though they were,
They caused it.
responsible for
Yeah.
this.
Yep.
They were kind of the catalyst for all this, but you're the one left holding the bag, and it's a tough thing, man. It messes with you a little bit,
Yeah.
admittedly.
So tenants could have up to 18 days to get their stuff. Even after that, there are laws and requirements for disposing of their stuff, estate sales and stuff like that. So don't want to get very far into that,
No.
but any questions, thoughts?
No, I think this has been a good discussion.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's-
No,
Yeah. We
skip
should do-
it, go
we
to the lawyer.
We should do a
not- yeah.
WSR Horror Stories podcast where we just freak everybody out for Halloween. But
Yeah, exactly.
That's not this one.
Exactly. All right. So, what systems do you have in place that dramatically reduce the chances of ever getting to eviction in the first place?
I think that's what we kind of led off with. That was kind of our lead. That you get ahead of it. I guess in summary, screening matters, not avoiding red flags, things that should be addressed up front, should be explored, and you should drill down. You don't just take a credit score on face value. And the most important thing, as I've said before, is setting that expectation. This is a contract. This is what I expect. This is what I expect from you. This is what you can expect from me. And you fulfill the contract. It's really that simple. And then if you do that, the likelihood of you ever getting into an eviction, as we have proven here at WSR, if you follow those concrete steps, it's very unlikely. That's one of the reasons we have such a low eviction rate here as an aggregate total here for WSR Real Estate, is that exact thing. It's all about the relationship.
Do what you say you're going to do.
Amen.
When you meet those tenants, hey, rent is due on the 1st. You have until the 5th to pay, but after that it's late. I don't want to come looking for you.
Yep.
And on the 6th, they're getting a 3-day notice. And years ago, we acquired another property management company, and the woman that owned it, man, she was tough. She was tough, and I think I picked up 20 of her properties, and those tenants paid on the 1st every month. They were scared, and she had them trained. I'm like, wow. And I learned some lessons from her because she did what she said she was going to do. And those tenants paid on the 1st, and if they didn't pay on the 5th, they knew they were getting a 3-day notice. And this is, gosh, back in the mid-'90s. But she was right on it.
Yep.
So on that note, having these tenants trained in a sense, I've been in a scenario where I've had to clean up after bad management and things like that. Property owners were managing it themselves or had another property manager. They come to us.
That's your specialty, isn't it?
I don't want it to be, but I guess it is. But these tenants, some of them don't know what they're doing is wrong. They pay on the 10th, the 15th, and their landlord, their property manager didn't care. They accepted it. And then behind the scenes, the landlord's like, oh, why won't they pay on the 1st? Why won't they pay on the 1st? They get us involved. I set the expectations very clearly from the beginning. Hey, rent's due on the 1st. And they're like, what? I've always paid on the 10th, or I've always paid on the 15th, or the property owners never had an issue.
$5,000 in late fees that are occurring they don't know about.
You know, and so setting those expectations, having those, you know, doing what you say you're going to do, it helps the tenants know, because there's some tenants that genuinely, for whatever reason, they see what they can get away with, or they just don't know, and they pay, and things are happy, and no one says otherwise, and it can lead to a bad scenario like this. But if you are clear up front, you prevent that from happening.
You know, Devin, you're spot on. In fact, not only is it better for the landlord, it actually is better for the tenant, because they understand that there's no wiggle room.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important.
How do you play the game if you don't know what the rules are?
That's right. So don't move the goalpost. Don't let them move the goalpost. It is what it is.
Yeah. It's contract law.
Yep.
Both sides have said what they're going to do.
Yep.
Now just keep up to it.
Yeah.
Landlords take care of business,
Yep.
take care of the property, do what you're supposed to do. Tenants, do what you're supposed to do, and everybody's happy.
It's at will. I mean, you did not force them into this contract. You had something that they wanted to participate in. You had an offering. So you guys came to an accord. There's the contract. That's it.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong about that. And a lot of people get stuck up in this whole idea of going, oh, man, I'm heartless or whatnot. But it's funny how when things are flipped around, it's easy to play that card. I mean, well, you're heartless. You're doing this to me as well. What do you think you're doing to me? I've got expenses. I've got burdens that I'm bearing. And you cast all of those burdens onto me now as the landlord, as opposed to you taking responsibility. So it is a quid pro quo. There's two sides to this thing. And anybody that tells you otherwise, man, go sing elsewhere, because that's not in this sort of relationship or this space. So anyway.
Well, that brings us to the end. Any final thoughts? Devin, any thoughts to close us out?
We talked a lot about evictions, things like that, bad tenants, and I talk with a lot of owners, and that is one of their number one concerns. But I also like to reassure owners, there are a lot of good tenants out there. We have a lot of good tenants at WSR that they pay their rent, they take care of the property. And there's more of those good tenants than there are those bad tenants. And if you do what you say you're going to do, you prevent scenarios like those bad tenants not paying the rent on time or having to go to eviction even from coming up. And so we talked a lot about hard stuff, but there's a lot of good, and it can be a great relationship for the tenants, the landlords, property managers, all around. So, yeah.
That was
Absolutely.
good.
Oh,
That was
all right.
positive. Wow.
Yeah.
How do you follow that?
I don't know. Go for it. Any final thoughts?
You know, communication and just do what you say you're going to do. I
Yeah.
think that prevents a lot of problems down the road. Watch those little red flags.
Yep. Excellent. Eric, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just two real quick ones. You know, if you're a landlord and you're looking for a good property management company, don't come here, because we're a great one. And Devin really exemplifies that. By the way, you hire WSR, chances are you're going to be interfacing with Devin anyway, and he's got such great hair. The other three of us,
He got it
pale
from
in
his father.
comparison. Yeah. But,
Excellent. Yes,
yeah,
I
good
happen
stuff.
to be the online face of WSR. Devin is definitely the in-person face for a lot of new landlords, that's for sure. Yep. Excellent. Well, then let's close this out, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Sounds great.